There it is. And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Take Two. Thank you for tuning in or watching in later, whatever the case may be. Um, as we get started, a couple things to let you guys know. One is this is where we meet every Wednesday, 7 p.m., and also where we meet Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. If you want to follow us, you can come here to YouTube and see this at those two times. Also, Sunday mornings, want to let you know that again, if you need to be someplace on Sunday, if you're going through some things and you need to be here, you can be here. It's not like we have so many people. We are worried about health issues. You can be here. Or if you know someone who needs to be here and maybe they're not able to tune in, please let them know they are welcome here. We have masks. We can socially distance, and we will be opening up outdoors very soon where we can have people sitting outside together but separated. But at least start gathering in that way in some capacity here soon. We'll let you know more about the exact dates as that comes up. One other thing before we get started, I want to let you know about is next Thursday, not tomorrow, but the following Thursday, I believe it's the 18th, we are going to be taking food again to the people at ER at San Antonio Hospital. That's going to be for their morning and evening groups. It's actually, I think it's at 11 o'clock. It's when the early shift, they are there from I think 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning, um, and then 7 in the morning to 7 at night. I think those are the two shifts. So we do 11 p.m. and 8 p.m. We're going to be taking them food. We're going to be providing a total of 50 meals to the people who are there at San Antonio ER, even as we did last time. And I'm saying all this because if you would like to contribute towards that, you can by maybe writing out on the however you do donate that for food for the ER, whatever you want to do for the nurses. Let us know, and that money will be going towards that. We plan on doing that for a while until they are alleviated. Again, they have two giant tents outside. They have a COVID and a non-COVID tent, and it's a little bit crazy for them having to work in that environment. And again, they're pretty slammed right now, where their beds are full and they have people in the hallways and their rooms are full. So we want to do what we can to show appreciation for them during that time. So, with that being said, hello, Eileen. Uh, we've got again here Jordan Jarnigan. Um, I know I introduced you, Jordan, last time briefly. I mean, Jordan used to lead the philosophy and critical thinking classes that you had here. And we met through a mutual friend, through Brian,
Mm-hmm.
our mutual friend. Maybe you can tell a little bit about how you ended up here and even how you found out that this was a church, because I think that's kind of a funny story.
Okay. Well, yeah, talk about working in mysterious ways. I guess a long time ago, I'm almost 30 now, but when I was entering into my 20s, I had this kind of crisis of faith thing and kind of dropped Christianity. I've been grown in Christianity like my whole life, but for lots of different reasons, I just didn't really have too much faith. And for 10 years, I was living and going to college and all that kind of stuff. Moved to Seattle, and when I moved back, I was kind of in a state of depression, and my mom was like, "You're like a creative person. You should go be around creative people because that makes you happy." And so she was pestering me to go out, and I ended up at this place called Intention because Will, or MC Prototype, was somebody I knew back in college, and he's one of the two people that set up Intention, and Brian happens to be the other person. So I go and I'm like, okay, this is cool, and I'm watching good performances and stuff. If Intention ever comes back, I highly suggest you guys go there. It's like an open mic, but everybody is handpicked, so it's good performances all night. Uh, And so,
Which is appreciated.
yes. Uh, and so I go a few times, and one of the times at the end, Brian ends up saying, "Hey, we have this platform here called Intention for artists that can perform, and we want to help give platforms to other artists that don't necessarily perform, so that we can like kind of give a spotlight to everybody in our community. So I'm starting a school, and if you want to help teach, you should come and talk to me." And at the time, I thought Brian was kind of like a famous poet guy that I didn't know. So I was nervous to talk to him, number one. And number two, like, I wasn't thinking that I was going to teach a class. I just thought it was a cool community thing. I went to approach him. I was like, yo, if you need help, like, setting up chairs or doing something, yeah, let me know. And he was like, you want to teach a class? And long story short, I talked to him. I pitched this philosophy and critical thinking workshop idea, which I call PACT. That's the acronym for it. He said cool, and I started teaching these classes at Genesis, which I thought was just some venue for for whatever Brian was doing. And then I met Sam, and Sam got introduced to me as the guy that runs Genesis, so I thought he was like the landlord. And I was trying to like make a good impression so he didn't kick me out. Then he showed up to one of the PACT sessions, the workshops, and he was being very engaged and stuff, and I was like, okay, this is cool. And then he starts like using a bunch of like Christian references and asking questions from that kind of mindset, and I was like, that's very interesting that he's very like that. And it was fine because we're open to ideas and stuff, but we have a conversation afterwards. Turns out he's a pastor. Turns out he's the lead pastor of a church, and we're physically in that church during that conversation. It's just like, whoa. So I really respected Sam's point of views, his willingness to be open and even invite something like PACT into his church. And it got me to thinking, like, he's so interesting to talk to during the workshops. I bet if he's doing sermons or what he calls talks, those are probably interesting too. So I started listening to those, and now I'm kind of a member of Genesis.
It's great, and Jordan helps out every Sunday just about here with the video and setup and those things too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a natural transition for him to be here, to be helping, and to, again, since I've heard you talk, and we talk often, even after our talk on YouTube, where we still have conversations afterwards. I wanted to bring him in, and I love that story because the whole idea of church is something we're trying to recreate or to recapture, right? Where it's not a place you go, but it's a people who are a part of a movement, and the role or title of pastor is something that I'm trying to, again, reimagine and see in a way that I think is more what it was intended to be than a person who's a leader of a building group of people, to someone who connects people to God and lets God do most of the work, but is definitely leading the responsibility in that group to help connect and facilitate those things. And so all those things, you didn't know I was a pastor, didn't know this was a church. I love that. I love that because when you found out, it was kind of the very organic way of finding out. It would be like, I think it should be, instead of, oh, here's the steeple and here's the cross and here's all the scripture stuff on the walls. It should be something that happens from the people that you encounter, that you say, oh, okay, this is what's going on. These people think, believe, live like this. And so I think that's great. Now, from that time, I'm going to press into your story a little bit, where you were in college, kind of removed from the faith. What's been the journey from that point to today? I mean, for you.
Well, I would like to first say that in my mind, there's a very big separation between religion and faith.
Okay.
Where religion is like stuff that humans do, and faith is something that you do between you and the divine.
Okay.
And I would say that my religion was very low over time. I think while I was like a child and a teenager growing up into a young adult, I had been in a church. I had always wanted a church to be a certain thing where we could talk about ideas, question things, grow, and I don't know, like be real people. And I always felt that you had to dress up on Sundays to come to church, or else people would look at you weird. Like if you were in sweatpants, you weren't allowed to come to church. And that was always weird to me as a kid because, like, when I read the Bible, it said, and I did read the Bible to try and figure out why I didn't understand what church was. I was always confused. Like they said, like your body is the temple. So why are you going to dress up for 2 hours a week? And then when I asked my Sunday school teacher that when I was like 7, I got put on timeout.
Oh, gosh.
And so I had these kind of experiences where I would try to figure out stuff and I would try to ask questions and I would be punished or told to be quiet or, you know, just trust God and stuff like that. And it just seemed so like different than what I was reading in the Bible that I kind of put it away. But I wouldn't say I necessarily put my faith away, even though I put the Bible away.
Okay. And then moving forward from that now, since you put that away, have you taken it back up? What's going on in you currently?
Oh yeah, I feel very blessed to have met Sam. I remember the first conversation I had with him as a pastor. I had like a few conversations before, and then I got revealed that he was a pastor, and we were talking about what church is and what it should be. And I remember talking to him. He's the first person I've ever talked about that had an idea like anywhere similar to what I had as a child of what church should be. And it was strange. And I don't know, it felt like relief of something like you've been suspicious about something your whole life. And I was like, I knew this was real. and
That's cool.
It's been, since then, I've been going to church, I think, almost every week. I watch some church sermons online. I read the Bible all the time. And this, I think, has been really interesting because the perspective or the kind of atmosphere that is at Genesis has, I feel, made me more willing to let the faith and let the Bible speak for itself rather than trying to force it to fit something. And when I read the Bible now, it's like, it's way different.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. And that's great to be a part of this journey with you. Right? I mean, it's been exciting for me to see those things develop and get to know you and to be here sitting with you. I think it's been good. I mean, and when I was putting together the talk from Sunday, I remember when I kind of finally figured, okay, this is what I want to talk about. Afterwards, I thought, I want Jordan to talk with me on take 2 after this, just for those reasons, because of all the things that you've said and you've journeyed, and, you know, this idea of why Christian. You know, for me, I highlighted a couple of things that have stood out to me. And I can't say that this has always been the case, but it's definitely been something that's grabbed my attention, held me, and has captured not only my imagination, but my devotion. And that's been the paradox of shame and the reversal of sacrifice that I mentioned about that. They are so, it's so much like what I experience in life, that it makes so much sense that God would be a part of something this real, if I could put it in that way. Something that it gets to the root of, I think, who I am, what I need, and what I've experienced that strikes me as divine. And that's kind of why I gravitated to these things. But I'd like to throw the ball in your court and get some input from your listening to it on Sunday or through the week if you have. Anything that stood out to you or questions that you have regarding any of those things.
Okay. Well, like I am here every Sunday behind the cameras. Like, if you ever see the music lyrics mess up, that's me. But to be honest, like I only half listen during the sermons because I'm like also half working. So I always have to listen
That's
again.
okay. Keep doing that, please.
But it's good. It gives me a chance to like uh, think and ponder and kind of reflect on it. So it's I think it's a good thing. But this I would say the biggest impact on me is I think sometimes we tend to have uh, there's like knowledge and then there's like understanding and then there's like revelation. Where I think those are like progressions into a topic, and you tend to know something, but then like you realize it's true and it becomes real to you. It's not just like something that you read on a fortune cookie or something like that. Um,
Now, is that experientially, or how does that change?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, something that you are aware of, have information about, to something that you know, or you kind of know. What is the transition between just the awareness and the more deeper understanding?
Uh, I think it could come in different ways. I think most of the time it comes through experience. So,
Okay.
like my dad, when I was like a little kid, back when like a dollar was a lot of money, he used to be like, "Money out of sight causes a fight." He wouldn't add anything to that. It was just like he was telling me like little poems.
Uh-huh.
And now that phrase is like, before I do anything with my money with other people, it's like he also used to say, "Don't let anybody borrow anything that you're not ready to give away." um, and you go through experiences and you're like, I see why that's true. And it's for a lot. I think when you're on the far side of something, on the realization side, you understand different reasons for things. Like when you learn martial arts, like somebody that goes into martial arts usually starts because they want to like learn how to fight,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get far enough into it, hopefully, that you learn that it's about not fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that realization point where you're like, oh, I'm doing all of this so that I never have to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference between like knowing it and like realizing it and being like it being a part of you. And the thing that kind of was brought up in the talk on Sunday that like kind of hit me, and I was thinking a lot about, odd that I never connected this, but crucifixion is basically lynching. um,
Yeah.
and that was like, whoa, yeah, they kind of line up pretty good.
Yeah.
And crucifixion seems like this far off thing that Mel Gibson tried to bring a little closer, but it still seemed like Star Wars-y, kind of like not real.
Yeah.
But lynching to me seems very real, and it brought the idea of crucifixion, at least in my mind, as to something that's like more tangible. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily I didn't believe it or this didn't happen or that didn't happen, but like it kind of forced me to empathize with the situation more.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't say that I know anybody that's been lynched, but I will say that I have been in situations where I felt like that could happen to me. I've had people
Wow.
chase me around with guns. I've had people try and throw me in vans.
Mm.
I've had people say very strange things to me. And that to me is a real experience. Like I've never really experienced any crucifixion stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Thankfully, yeah. We kind of got past that, but yeah. But the understanding of power being abusive,
mm-hmm.
right? And just having that kind of ability to take away something, and the injustice of it and the crime of it, and even the shame of what all that looks like, I think captures it a little bit more than what we have as far as the paintings and the movie presentation. I mean, even as I was reading and studying this, a revelation to me was that crucifixion happens more in eye level than elevated, right? And I was like, holy cow, that's weird. To think you walking down and you see someone right there, and you're able to have that kind of close interaction with someone who is in that much pain and going through all that is a whole different level of reality, I think, than I was used to experiencing, or dealing with mentally, which is the whole point of this, right? It's the whole point of that kind of tangibility, whether it be the understanding of lynching or being more closely connected to what's happening than it being distant 2,000 years away or high up on a cross. It's changes the perception and makes it a little bit more, I don't know, horrific.
Yeah. And to me, like, because I listen to this podcast called Hardcore History, which the guy that does that, Dan Carlin, he really tries to, like, before he tells you what happened, he really tries to plop you out of whatever year you live in and put you in that year and in that mindset and then those people and really say, like, before you think this is crazy, this is how this worked and all this. Now that we know a little bit about that, let's look at what actually happened. And yeah, the tangibility of something is very different. Like I'm reading through Judges this week, the book, and like I was reading through Samson last night, the story of Samson, and the Bible I have has like notes in regular English, like commentary, and it was talking about when Samson was at that party that he like brought the temple down, and they were saying, yeah, this was this kind of thing where people would come and they'd bring out prisoners to like torture them for fun. And then all of the poor people would literally be on the roof of the temple looking in, because like the middle of the temple was open, to like watch people get tortured because they're bored and that's something you do. And this is like you're feet away from this person. They're like, it's not just you see it on TV. It's like there's the smell of it. You can hear the yells. Like you can feel the presence. They can look you in the eye and stuff like this. And this was normal. This was not, oh my gosh, you went to that? Like this was, oh yeah, are you coming? Yeah.
It's like you're going to the show or something.
And like the whole experience of it and the whole mindset of the people back then, I can't stress is different. And I don't want to say like I'm better than them. Like we don't do that anymore because we definitely like lynching still happens. But
but there's definitely been a progress, thankfully. Right?
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean. It's a human progress, right? I mean, it's not just a religious one. Definitely, it's something that we see humanity moving from places where it moves forward, from where, human sacrifice or this kind of torturing that was entertainment, even though they're still torturing and there's still slavery and there's still all kinds of horrific things happening, it is not in the same level, the same mindset. Now at least the majority of society frowns upon those things, right? There's been an evolution of how we interact with one another, and so thankfully, but understanding that gives you a whole lot of insight to what was actually happening. And that's very important to bring into your narrative when you're reading something like that or dealing like with crucifixion, because the whole idea of the cross to us now becomes something we sing songs about the cross. It becomes, the wondrous cross. I don't know if anyone in the first century would have sung those songs at that time. It's like, oh, the wonderful cross. It's like, what are you talking about? This is not a wonderful thing. My friend is out there right now. This isn't a wonderful thing. It's only when we're removed and we're able to look back on it in a different way that we can pull out of it things that have the ability to change that meaning. But we shouldn't lose the meaning in that way.
Like perspective-wise, I would say being in the middle of something and being someone that watches it from outside, like you're safe and nothing's going to happen to you, you can't participate, are way different. And it's super hard to empathize or to really get a feel for what it's like to have that pressure on you. I read an interesting thing the other day where there's a take on empathy where it's your attempt to simulate what's happening in somebody else. And it could be way wrong. Just because you have empathy doesn't mean it's good. You can like be way off base and think or try and simulate a feeling and be incorrect. And the article was arguing that's what happens most of the time, because it's almost absurd to argue that most people are correct most of the time. But perspective-wise, I was reading this thing where it was talking about the fear of God. I think it was in some devotionals that I was doing, and that that term I'm bringing up because it always struck me as kind of strange. Because during my younger years, I was grown up in the good and evil, where certain
Yeah.
things were good, like fear is bad, hell is bad, heaven is good, grace is good.
Right.
But then you say, have the fear of God, but don't be afraid. And I've been getting more into this mindset of there is what I've heard been called a kingdom perspective on everything, because everything God made everything, and so there's a way that God looks at everything, and it includes all the stuff we think is ungodly. There's a godly version of everything, and or a godly way to look at it or use it. And fear, like the fear of God, is being so in awe of God that you're afraid to do anything to displease Him. And that fear of displeasing Him or doing something bad in His sight is what kind of keeps you in line and keeps you doing the right thing. That's what I understand the fear of God to be. That could be way off. That's my understanding. That's my simulation. But in this case, shame came up a lot in the talk that you were talking about, and I was trying to put in my head, like, well, what is a kingdom perspective on shame, and am I getting caught up because I am having a mindset that is not working for me, and that's why this is a paradox.
And I think so much has been revealed with shame, especially like, the research Brene Brown has done on shame and how it affects us, how it keeps us from becoming wholehearted, she says, right? Because our idea of shame and us not being worthy of love, not being worthy of something because of who we think we are, is what stops people from trying. And that the people who are actually vulnerable, who are willing to go past the shame, are able to come through the other side and find depth in relationships because they're willing to risk it, you know. And so I think in that regard, this idea of shame being, oh, you're despised, you're no good, you're a criminal, you're worthy of this punishment, you're not worthy of love or those kinds of things, is what keeps people from actually getting to that kind of depth and relationships and finding meaning in their life because they see themselves as not good enough. What if that place where we're not good enough is actually where God says, I'll meet you here, right? And I'll take you right here, and I'll see you're not good enough and meet you with love, you know. And that's kind of what I had in mind with this idea of shame and the things that take place in that.
Okay. You bringing up shame, I think contrast is the wrong word, but that's the word in my mind. And love, kind of in the same part of this conversation. And to me, is like, if you have, and I'm going to say kingdom perspective.
Okay.
If you have the kingdom perspective on one thing that influences another thing, but the other thing you don't have a kingdom perspective on, that could still mess you up. Because if I think, my definition of love is the worldly definition of love, but I have a kingdom definition of shame, I still might not seek love because I see love incorrectly, even though I'm standing from the correct place in shame.
Okay.
Sorry to get super complicated, but shame, I think it's the idea of, you were saying, like in the old school days of like sacrifice, like Old Testament days, like I did bad, so shame on me. So I got to go like kill a lamb or something like that, or burn some bread, and then yay, I can go do more bad stuff until I need to do another sacrifice. And that's like, I did something bad, I need to give an offering because there's shame on me, and I brought it on myself by my actions. Or sometimes you're saying like, my son brought it on me.
Yeah.
Something connected me brought shame. But the idea of Jesus is, as far as I get it, is I did something shameful, or I am going to be a sinner. I'm doing all this sinny stuff that's bad. And Jesus, who wasn't even a part of that, comes down or comes over to
Mm-hmm.
be by me and share in that, and to kind of share that load and take that burden. I think it changes the idea of shame because it removes blame,
Hmm.
and it becomes a totally different concept
Hmm.
because he knows he's not at fault, and everybody knows he's not at fault.
Yeah.
And to do that, I think it lifts the shame, because shame, I think, is like, we think of words of like stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And stigma to me is like, you're that.
Yeah.
And that's blame. And if you can remove the blame, the action still remains, but it's kind of like you taken out the part that's the bad part.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to divide that line between blame and shame because they're kind of married together in some ways, and some things might be considered shameful. But I think what Jesus is doing is identifying with us there and saying, even though
Mm-hmm.
it's okay, even though you did this, the woman caught in adultery, um, I don't condemn you. And so the blame or the weight of the blame is like, yeah, I'm not going to hold that you, I'm not going to hold that on you, right? And so I think that point is important, because if in the kingdom perspective I'm not being blamed, but instead God is saying, no, I can meet you here, and I can take the blame so that it's not your weight, but I'll identify with that weight. Um, it changes everything. It changes how you see God. It changes how you see your relationship with God and interaction with Him. And going back to even your fear analogy, when you're afraid of something, it makes your world smaller, right? Because I'm afraid to be up high. I don't go up ladders, right? So my world is a little smaller because I don't do that. If I'm afraid, of small places, I stay out of them, and so my world's a little bit smaller. But when you are afraid, and that's not the same word as fear, but when you have that fear of God, it actually makes your world bigger, because if I fear God, I don't need to fear anything else.
Yeah.
When I train dogs and I have a dog that's very fearful, I try and get the dog to be more afraid of me than the skateboard or whatever else is going on. Because if the dog's afraid of me, I can be more important than the skateboard and teach the dog how to get past it.
Hmm.
Right? And so the whole point of you be afraid of me isn't because I'm bad. It's because I know it's best for you, and I'm going to help you live a life that's more encompassing of everything, because I will help you past all those other fears. And so I think that same thing kind of happens in this idea of shame and being afraid of, oh no, look at who I am, look at what I've done. And God saying, no, I'll meet you here. All you need to do is worry about me, and I'll take care of everything else. And so there's kind of a freedom that's there. Like when Jesus says, if the Son sets you free, you're free indeed. Free of what? Free to be me, including my mistakes, right? Including my way out thoughts, including my, you know, idiosyncrasies and all those things that are a little quirky, that, are different, that might make me feel ashamed of those things. If I don't have to think about those things as being, blamed for or afraid of those things, um, and if that's where God is going to meet me, it's a real freeing thing
Yeah.
in that regard, you know. And I think that's kind of what I feel from the idea of cross. If crucifixion is where God chooses to connect to me, then he can connect to me anywhere. You know, it's kind of my thought on that. It's just like, heck, if that's where you want to meet me in this place, you can meet me anywhere. Make sense? Or what are your
Yeah.
thoughts? I see the wheels turning in your brain.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to get them to stop. But oh, I was thinking about something sprung out to me as like important that I feel may get like glossed over if we don't talk about it. But so Jesus comes to sit with you where you're at and not blame you, but to be with you and help you with your burdens.
Mm-hmm.
But what he always does, in my experience of reading the Bible, because every time you read the Bible, it's a different book. But he always acknowledges what happened. He never ignores anything. He like almost always says it out loud. He always like creates it in the reality. He names the elephant in the room, but he doesn't blame you for it. And I think that's the acknowledgement of the thing, of the stigma, of the blameworthy item, and then not giving the blame. Just not giving the blame, I don't think is good, because then if I didn't acknowledge it, then there could be a possibility, like in my mind, that maybe he doesn't know, or maybe he's just not saying it, but he really is
Yeah.
blaming me. But when you acknowledge it, I think that's so powerful, that you're saying, when you say even though, or I'm aware of this, or you've
Yeah.
had 5 husbands,
Right.
it's like, wow, this guy knows all my dirt. This person
Yeah.
is really here for the real me. They're not here for the Instagram me. They're not here for
Right.
the family Easter photo me. This is the real me, and they're not blaming me, and they're accepting me. And I think that, in terms of liberation, is like the acknowledgement is key to freedom and key to you being you. Because if he didn't do that, he's not, from how I think, he's not coming to lift the shame off of you if he doesn't acknowledge you.
Yeah.
He has to actually spell out who he's dealing with, and then
Yeah.
deal with it.
No, that's huge. That's a huge and important part. If you don't name it, then you don't own it. And if you don't own it, then how can you be delivered from it, right? I mean, and that really has to do even with the analogy of, it's not the healthy, but the sick who need a physician, right? If you don't know you're sick, you don't look for the help to get past it. It's only when you recognize that, I haven't come to call the righteous, but unrighteous to repentance, to change those things. I mean, there is what Scripture talks about, a circumcision of the heart, right?
Okay.
Where God has to deal with, operate on something within us, and He can only do that if it's there and we acknowledge it's there, right? And so that is definitely an important part of the whole idea of crucifixion, is to deal with what is there in us. I mentioned ego. I mean, I think pride is, well, C.S. Lewis said, pride is the sin from where all sins come. It really is the big sin. It is pride that made the devil a devil, kind of a thing. And if I think that is the root that gets dealt with also in the idea of crucifixion, because he emptied himself. There was no ego there. And this is your example. Have this mind that was in Christ, and that's contrary to that thing in me that needs to be dealt with. And it reveals, it calls out, it names that thing in me, I think, in a very personal way, by an example of, see this? That's what you need to be. And it's like, oh man, I'm so not like that. I've got so much ego that for me to think of others is more important than myself, for me to deny myself and to humble myself and to have that idea where I despise the shame that's going to be put on me because this is more important. That calls it out in a big way, and I think that is important, though, because if I don't think I have any of those things. You know, it's the alcoholic who says, "Yeah, I'm just here because it's, yeah, I don't have a drinking problem. I just like to
Yeah.
come to the meetings."
Yeah, the judges make me come, but
Yeah,
it's not real.
yeah, it's not a problem for me. I just like the coffee. Yeah, you're not going to get help if you don't acknowledge it. You don't deal with it.
That was like, because I don't know if you're finished with it, but you were working on that series about calling in, where you had
Mm-hmm.
the whiteboard and those four
Mm-hmm.
quadrants. Um, and you're talking about it. And when I have conversations, like, I think that the beauty of conversations with other people that are willing to be open and vulnerable with you is that you guys get to work on a project together, which is the conversation.
Hmm.
By you both contributing and sharpening each other, like, I'll be talking and then Sam will be like, "Oh yeah, this."
Yeah.
He never would have thought that unless we had the conversation.
Right.
So I was thinking in terms of Jesus is doing the call in thing, and if you go through the 3 years that Jesus is running around and like saving people and doing miracles and stuff, he like never forces anybody to get miracles and never forces anybody to get saved. And you have to like meet him. You have to come in when he's calling in. He's like, come. He's calling you, but you have to come. And in terms of the shame and the blame and the acknowledgement, if I don't acknowledge what's going on, Jesus won't acknowledge what's going on. And it can be very scary because, like, I think in our daily or in our regular experience, acknowledging something blameworthy invites blame. And so we don't want to do that, but it's the only way to deal with the real, because that's what it is. And by being vulnerable and opening up, and you have to do some work first by admitting it or actualizing it or creating it in the space, then it can be dealt with. And I think Jesus calls us to be, in terms of him leading by example and us being Christ-like, it's to allow people space to be vulnerable and open up, and then not immediately chastise them or immediately tell them to go to AA. It's to sit with them and be with them.
Yeah.
But it does involve work from both sides. It can't only come from one side.
Yeah. No, that's kind of focusing even more on that call in, and that's kind of really what I'm going to be talking about in the next few weeks, is about dealing with the want, the desire, that Jesus is always trying to get to the desire of people. And we always focus on kind of the words, the things that we say. This is my belief system. This is what I think. We focus on, this is what I do. It's kind of a religious thing, right? Here's the things I believe. Here's how I show those beliefs. But underneath the surface is the wants. This is what I really want. And Jesus wants those all three. He doesn't just want these two. He wants underneath the surface and your desire. And so he'll ask, what do you want? Right? Like the sons of thunder, hey, Jesus, can we ask you whatever we want? And he's like, yeah, what do you want? I love that he leans into that question. If someone asks me, can I have whatever I want? I'd say probably not. I'd probably say probably not. But he goes, well, what do you want? I feel like he's like, I'm intrigued. What do you want? Because it's not many people that really tell me what they want, and he does it with Peter and he does it with Judas. So it's really interesting that the want is something that we tend to, demonize. Oh, my wants are bad. I can't have those wants. And we just tend to keep them under the surface, where Jesus is wanting to integrate them with the whole of who we are. And I think that's an important part of that call in, is if I'm going to call you in, I got to call all of who you are. And that includes what it is you want. And if you don't know what you want, and if you won't name what you want, then you're not being real here. Like the rich ruler who went away sad because what he really liked was his money. It's like, sell everything, follow me. That's not what I want. And he got called out on that. Ben asked a question: if the cross was a symbol of shame, what do you guys think Jesus meant by pick up your cross daily?
Uh, uh, in terms of something being one thing, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's we can look at it from that perspective and my answer from that perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the cross could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
But in terms of it being a symbol of shame, I would say it's kind of what we're talking about, where
Mm-hmm.
it's the symbol of Jesus coming to meet us as humans, and us humans are these dirty, ugly, really mean creatures that kind of destroy everything we touch.
Mm-hmm.
And the cross is this symbol of how to deal with that. What do you do with dogs that bite and attack people? What do you do with people that murder people? Like when you look at how you deal with certain things, a lot of times we put it away, and we put it away in a way where it tells everybody not to do that if it's a behavior we don't like. And by Jesus doing that and not really being deserving of that, he's not, I would say, what most of the people that get crucified are. What, like, he's it's not that the shame is on something he did. He's being put there, and people are trying to put shame on him. And by him taking the shame, I think that makes it even deeper, because normally it's like, I have shame, then Jesus comes and takes my shame. But
Yeah.
people are trying to put shame on Jesus. And he's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's at the heart of it, right? When he says take up your cross daily, it's like act like Jesus, who is sacrificial and is loving and giving, not worried about the ego, but giving, elevating others more than himself, having a kingdom mentality. This is the right thing to do. Your will be done, not mine. All those things are part of that. I think taking up the cross daily is a part of that. You know, we say, I'm crucified with Christ. We're dying to ourselves. All that terminology is, I think, similar in that it's trying to capture a little bit of what Jesus actually did, of emptying himself, sacrificing himself for others, giving of himself for others. And so I think that's what's meant by picking up your cross. And I think it's good that it's not just a symbol of shame. It definitely was, but it's also a symbol of sacrifice now, looking at how Jesus did it as well. So, anyway, Ben, hope that answers your question, Ben. Any other thoughts you have, or things that you want to kind of throw on the table and talk about from what you heard, or things?
Well, I think one of the underlying themes of this conversation is like uh, looking at things non-traditionally. So we're looking at shame in a way that I guess most people don't typically look at shame. We talked about fear a little bit. And this, in my mind, is like the renewing of your mind kind of thing. That idea where don't be so entrenched in just because I was raised this way, or my mom always did this, like this is right. And it's not only that something is right or wrong, but is it serving you, or is it serving the Lord? And sometimes it's okay to have a bunch of different perspectives about the same thing. And by having 10 different perspectives, it helps you do the right thing at the right time. Like, you have different radio stations, and it helps you listen to different songs when certain radio stations are like out of range and stuff like that. And I was gonna bring up fear again, because you were talking about your experience with dogs and fear. And one of the things I think about fear is, like, I rock climb outdoors, and it can be like rather dangerous. And what I've thought about fear, because there's been this like don't look down mentality, especially like when you're a couple of 100 feet up and there's no ropes and you fall, and you're gonna fall a couple of 100 feet or something like that. I'm not saying do that. Make sure that you're safe, and you do what's within your level. But what I've noticed about fear in my life is that while I think a lot of people think it's something to avoid, fear, I think, acts like a focus intensifier. And it's like a laser that will focus in on something, and if you don't force it to go somewhere, it'll kind of meander and go to the lowest object. And if you're focused on the low object, like if I'm 300 feet off the wall and I look down and now I'm afraid of falling and I focus on that, now like all my energy that could be spent on climbing is spent on running all these scenarios of me dying. But I don't know if you guys have ever felt like fear coming. Like there's like to me, there's a time period before it's like fully set in that it's what rising up in you. You're becoming afraid. Like if I'm here on top of the ladder and I'm afraid of heights and I look down, there's a couple of seconds before I get afraid. If I can, in those couple of seconds, focus myself on something else rather than continuing to focus on what I'm afraid of, that fear can help me because now it's focused over here. And I think instead of taking things from their stigma perspective, where this is a bad thing, we should not do this, we should not behave this way, it's like this is a creation of God. God made all things, and how is this useful? Like to me, fear helps me focus. I just have to like manage it. And it's not something that's bad and that somebody can shame me for. Like I think a lot of times we tend to make ourselves less than we are by taking negative perspectives of things. And I don't know if you guys have ever had coaches either for dieting or for exercise or whatnot, but I think they're kind of modeling Christ-like behavior within the realm that they're a coach, because they look at all of you. They look at how fat you are, how out of shape you are, how not flexible you are, and they're not like, oh, you should, well, a good coach is like, oh, you should stretch more of this. They're like, oh, well, you're that flexible? Well, here's an exercise that can work for you.
Yeah. Oh,
you can only run that far? Okay, well, then we'll run that far. And by looking at what you have and using what you have, rather than saying, oh, I can't do this because of that reason, or I'm shamed because of that reason, it's, well, okay, I have shame. How can I use that? Or what's a good way to look at through my shame?
Yeah, to use it in a way that's going to move you further and not just leave you there.
Yeah.
There's actually a psalm that says, "Blessed is the man who fears always." So just that idea of like, what? I'm going to be afraid. But again, it depends on your focus, right? What is it you're fearing? And the whole idea of that psalm is devotion, right? Blessed is the man who's devoted to God always, right? And so having a mentality that's higher than, bigger than the picture that you are stuck in helps you to get past it. Whether it's like, okay, this is the shame I'm in, knowing that, there is no sin that isn't common to man that Jesus hasn't dealt with. Okay, so it's not just me. Right? I'm not the only one who's here. So instead of ignoring it, denying it, pretending it's not there, I can acknowledge it, name it, and allow it to help me grow and move past it. Kind of something like that.
Yeah, I think that's the go pick up your mat and go home. Like after that guy gets lowered down from the roof, and gets healed, and it's like all that stuff, like the mat that you were laying on, the place that you were at while you were paralyzed or whatever. This is a story in the Bible where that guy, there's like Jesus telling this sermon or whatever to a bunch of people in a crowded house, and these guys want their friend to get healed by Jesus, but the house is too crowded, so they go on top of a stranger's house somehow and then break his roof open somehow and then lower this guy down right in front of Jesus. Jesus heals him, and then before he leaves, he says, pick up your mat and go with you. And I think it's about that, where God can use what you have. And if you're trying to have God use the possessions of your Instagram version of yourself, that version is not real. Right. So God can't use that. He has to use what you have and who you are. And sometimes if that's shameful, sometimes if that's depressed, sometimes if that's sad or regretful, like regret can be an amazing reminder to stay straight.
Yeah, definitely.
And so maybe it's a useful tool because that's what keeps you. It's surprising how many people that act well in the world, if you really go and dig into their past story, they'll be like, I wasn't always this way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the reason that they're this way now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it really helps actually give a little bit more color to the person's story, a little bit more depth. You know, I mean, my mom, God bless her, and the people who know her, and they see her in a certain way, but I knew her growing up when she was like a hippie and like wild woman, and you know, some of her tie-dyed outfits that are still back in the closet somewhere. You know, you start telling people about that and they're like, what is that? Right? Or my wife Corrine, when she calls me, you know, it's ACDC Back in Black, and they don't understand why that's her ringtone. But if you knew my wife like I know her, um, you'd know that's perfect for her, right? That was her song, and she loves that music. And so those kinds of things, you know, where you think, oh no, I don't want to be, you know, that's something I don't want to, I don't know, retain, you know, as part of my identity. It's like you can't get rid of it. It is who you are. And it actually makes your identity bigger. Even though that might not be, you might not ever wear that dress again or act that way again. It's still part of where you came from, kind of like Paul, you know, was Saul.
Yeah.
And it's like that was a big part of his identity that carried him to, you know, do all the things he did. Without that, couldn't have done it. So
Yeah, I can't think of a better example than the Christian killer becoming
becoming a Christian, yeah,
yeah, so
that's a pretty good one.
yeah.
Well, gosh, it's almost been an hour, man. That's flown by. That was pretty quick.
Yeah, I don't know where you're looking at oh, you're looking, okay, I kept looking at that and I was like,
Yeah.
time's so slow today.
No, I mean, that's good stuff. Good, and I love your focus on some of those things, like naming it. That's really important. Um, you know, ego was mine trying to name it for me,
Hmm.
but that is very important. You know, probably something I could have pinned on a little bit more, or stayed on a little bit more, or emphasized a little bit more. But that's great that you pointed that out. And even just dealing with fear, because I think shame and fear go hand in hand in a lot of ways. You know, we're afraid people will see us, and that shame we don't want to have stops us from naming it, stops us from admitting it, stops us from getting better. And so, good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you guys for joining us. All you here who commented in, and those who you will be watching it later. Thank you for participating in this. And
Yeah.
again, we'll be here next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Hopefully, you guys can benefit from these things. And we do want to have your comments. Appreciate you, Ben, for the question that was there. Um, uh, oh, okay. I mean, met Jordan on Brian's writing room or Zoom. Probably. I know Jordan was with us too on one of the Zoom calls with Dr. Quinlan before.
Yeah.
So probably met him there as well. Anyway, this is Jordan. For you guys who don't know him, now you do. And thank you for sharing your story with us too and being a part of this and helping out every Sunday. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I love having open discourse with people who are ready to be vulnerable in conversation. So I appreciate this a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, got to be vulnerable if you're going to grow. Got to be. Right. All right, guys. God bless you. Love you. Take care. And we hope to see you Sunday. Take care.